Section 9 of Pantheisticon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding. Pantheisticon by John Toland. Section 9. Of a twofold philosophy of the Pantheists that should be followed, to which is subjoined a short dissertation upon the idea of the best and most accomplished man. 1. We have, in the preliminary dissertation, with as much conciseness as perspicuity, discussed the nature, regulation, and names of private societies, or learned entertainments, among the Greeks and Romans; and at the same time we have not concealed the state or origin of the modern Socratic society, which we made the chief subject of our discourse. By the extraordinary form of this society now first brought to light, any one may see plainly that the manners of the brethren are not morose, rather polite and elegant, nay, even devoid of all vice and just censure. Moreover, the laws of this agreeable banquet, not less just than prudent, are to be learned, and the attractive charms of liberty, far remote from all licentiousness, are to be thoroughly read, so much the more as nothing is so prized by the brotherhood as not only the cultivating of modesty, continence, justice, and all kinds of virtues themselves, but also of exciting others, as well by words as example, to their practice. But they treat of all these human things humanely. You shall have jokes without gall, and liberty not to be dreaded in the morning, and no restraint laid upon your tongue. You may perceive that their religion is simple, clear, easy, without blemish, and freely bestowed, not painted over, not intricate, embarrassed, incomprehensible, or mercenary; not luring minds with silly fables, and ensnaring them by the filth, inhumanity, or ridicule of superstition; not subservient, I say, to the private advantage of any family or faction against the public good; not scandalizing or railing at, much less disturbing or tormenting any person or persons, so that they be honest and peaceable men. There is no occasion to make a longer discourse upon the improvement of the mind. The Pantheists can deservedly be styled the mists and hierophants of nature; for as formerly the Druids, men of an elevated genius, kept up to the strictness of their brotherly union, as the authority of Pythagoras has decreed, so also they were versed in the knowledge of the most abstruse things, and their minds were lifted up by the contemplation of the sublimest mysteries. The Socratic companions strenuously ruminate upon the same studies for which the Druids and Pythagorics made themselves so illustrious. Both instituted societies, yet the Pantheists allow not all their words and deeds. For where they depart from truth, there we also depart from them, praising voluntarily what we approve of, and giving thanks to those by whose labour we have in any shape benefited ourselves. 2. But perhaps it may be imputed as a fault to the Pantheists for embracing two doctrines, the one external or popular, adjusted in some measure to the prejudices of the people, or to doctrines publicly authorized for true; the other internal or philosophical, altogether conformable to the nature of things, and therefore to truth itself; and, moreover, for proposing this secret philosophy, naked and entire, unmasked, and without any tedious circumstance of words, in the recesses of a private chamber, to men only of consummate probity and prudence. But what person, unless equally ignorant of the disposition of the human genius, and what's transacted in nature, doubts that they act wisely? The reason of what I say is manifest. For no religion, no sect, can brook a contradiction, much less can endure that their doctrines should be charged with error or falsity, and their ceremonies with vanity or folly. All things, an't please you, are sent down to them from heaven, although they gape after earthly desires. They are divine, if you credit them, and indispensably necessary for the regulation of life, although 'tis evident that they are human, empty also, and superfluous, and often monstrous fictions; nay, even for the most part, destructive to the common and public tranquillity, as it appears to a demonstration from daily experience. Amongst so many various and disagreeing opinions, if it is not possible that none of them should be true, at least it is impossible that more than one of them should be true. This is an acute observation long ago made by Tully in discussing the nature of the gods. Wherefore the Pantheists, persons of the strictest moderation, behave towards frantic, foolish, and stubborn men as fond nurses do towards their babbling minions, who imbibe from them the pleasing infatuation of imagining themselves kings and queens, that they are the only papa and mamma's pets, and that there are none so pretty and so finy as they. Those that flatter not infants in these trifles are odious and disagreeable to them. Those, on the other hand, who do adhere not by line and level to the opinions of the ignorant, though adults, are abominated and ill-used. Their inveteracy is brought to such a pitch that they deign not to keep them company. They oblige them with no office of humanity. They would fain have them, whilst alive, prohibited fire and water, and when dead, eternally tormented. But as superstition is always the same in vigour, though sometimes different in rigour, and as no wise man's attempt was amiss in rooting it out of the minds of all persons, which could not be compassed at any rate, yet he'll use his endeavours to do all that can be done, that is, by plucking out the teeth and paring the nails of this worst and most pernicious of monsters, he will not suffer it at its pleasure to hurt on every side. It is to men in power, and politicians actuated with this noble disposition of mind, that we are indebted for all the religious liberty that is anywhere nowadays to be met with, which has redounded not a little to the great advancement of letters, commerce, and civil concord; whereas, on the contrary, to the superstitious or pretended worshippers of supreme powers, I mean to spirit-haunted enthusiasts or scrupulously pious, are owing all feuds, animosities, mutinies, mulcts, rapines, stigmats, imprisonments, banishments, and deaths. Thus it necessarily must happen, that one thing should be in the heart and in a private meeting, and another thing abroad and in public assemblies. This maxim has often been greatly in vogue, and practised not by the ancients alone; for, to declare the truth, it is more in use among the moderns, although they profess it is less allowed. 3. Having thus briefly established the twofold philosophy of the ancients, it will be no difficult matter to understand that the Pantheists, among so many different sects in vogue, and their mutual scuffles, I wish not massacres and carnage, lead a peaceable life, and neither hurried away by a love for those nor a hatred for these, study the safety of the republic, and the common good of mankind, sworn enemies of all debates and parties. If those who are going astray are pleased to be put upon the right road, they will courteously point it out to them. If they persist in their error, they will, notwithstanding, friendly and from their hearts, exercise a commerce of life with them. They know, and lay it down for a principle, that no man is to be disdained or scorned upon account of indifferent and harmless opinions, and that, whatever nation or religion he is of, his company, for the virtues and excellencies of his mind, is to be fought for, and in no wise to be avoided, but for his vices and the corruption of his morals. Therefore a Pantheist will never punish or disgrace any man for a mere sentiment. For sayings, I say, or actions that hurt no man, neither will he advise or instigate others to defile themselves by such a notorious piece of villainy. Fraudulent priests, or impotent silly women, may stir up magistrates against them, not able at the same time to lay any crime to their charge, or upbraid them with anything, except that they cannot solve their objections, or because they live a life more agreeable to the dictates of reason, and more uprightly than they themselves do. But none in a public employ, or charged with the interest of the public, will give ear to these brain-sick, fantastic persons, unless he is a man blinded by superstition, or, on the other hand, a slave to ambition and filthy gain, and consequently regardless of the honour that is due to virtue and merit. As for the rest, the Socratic companions, laying no stress upon the praise and scandal of others, make it their total endeavour to live after their own and not another's fancy, contented with their lot. They correct their hearts with virtuous precepts, and embellish their minds with learning, the better and with greater ease to be serviceable to themselves, their friends, and all persons. To approach, moreover, though they should never attain to it, with more certainty and nearer to that perfection which every good and learned man is obliged to have at heart, and wish for, either to acquire it for himself or impart it to others. Cicero, to whom our society is indebted for so many and such excellent things, towards the end of his first book of Laws, has furnished us with a distinct and exact idea of the best and most accomplished man. Let the learned then read, and form themselves according to this rule. 4. He that knows himself, says Tully, will first suppose that he has something divine, and he will think in himself that his genius is consecrated like any image of worship, and he will always act and think in a manner worthy of so great a favour of the gods. And when he has thoroughly known and wholly proved himself, he will understand how nature has set him off for life, and what considerable means he has to obtain and acquire wisdom, inasmuch as at first he imbibed in his mind an imperfect knowledge of all things, adorned by which, and guided by wisdom, let him show himself, according as his soul makes a greater progress towards perfection, a better man, and as a necessary consequence of his goodness, let him contemplate his happiness. For when his mind, formed by the knowledge and practice of virtue, has quitted its fondness and indulgence for the body, has laid a restraint upon pleasure as a stain to beauty, has made void the terrors of death and pain, has entered into a society of love with its own, has reputed all its own, whom nature has united by a mutual benevolence, has embraced the true worship of the Deity and the purity of religion, and has sharpened the edge as well of the wit as eyes to choose good and reject the contrary, which virtue from its forecast is called prudence, what situation can be said or thought to possess a more extensive happiness? The same accomplished man, when with due consideration he has taken a view of the heavens, earth, seas, the nature of all things, the causes of their generation, where they run back again, when and how they are to be dissolved, what is mortal and perishable in them, what divine and heavenly, when he has almost laid hold of the being that rules and governs these things, when he has discovered himself to be not enclosed within one wall, the native of any circumscribed place, but a citizen of the whole world as one city, in this magnificent appearance of things, and in this contemplation and knowledge of nature, ye immortal powers, how well he shall know himself! an advice imparted to us by the Pythian Apollo. How he shall despise, scorn, and repute as nothing what commonly is deemed the height of pomp and grandeur. As by a kind of rampire, he'll fortify all these particulars with staunch arguments, a just discernment of truth and falsehood, and a certain science and art of understanding. He'll know what conclusions he is to draw from his premises, and what is repugnant to every thing. As he's sensible that he is born for civil society, he will not only enter into the discussion of these matters by the subtilities of dispute, but also by a continued discourse, by which he may rule people, establish laws, chastise the wicked, defend the good, praise illustrious men, deliver wholesome precepts and persuasive encomiums to his citizens, exhort to honour, recall from wickedness, comfort the afflicted, and exhibit by everlasting monuments the transactions and ordinances of the brave and wise, to the indelible disgrace of the wicked. Now, as so many and such mighty things are perceivable in man by those who are willing to know themselves, we must necessarily conclude that wisdom is both their parent and the nurse that trains them up. 5. But who is it that would not be willing to be more wise and better? Who is it that could not? And where's the end of any discipline but to make men wise and good? If it is deficient in these respects, it seems to me for the greater part useless, though not entirely for ornament and elegance sake, to be rejected. Wherefore the Pantheist become wise, or at least possessed of the next degree to wisdom, shall not in the first place, to his prejudice, run counter to the received theology, that in philosophical matters swerves from truth. Neither shall he be altogether silent when a proper occasion presents itself. Yet he shall never run the risk of his life, but in defence of his country and friends. As to the most holy maxims of the Messiahs, which are ever and always to be professed, though without base additions and sinistrous interpretations, we undertake not to speak of them here, the place being foreign to them. Secondly, all the truths that the Pantheist can with safety disclose, as politics, astronomy, mechanics, economics, and such like, he shall not only not envy them to others, but even voluntarily communicate them, still never without a due caution, because the commonalty weighs most things in the scales of opinion, and but very few in those of truth. Finally, he shall exactly estimate, and in the silence of his heart meditate upon the more sacred dogmas, regarding either the nature of God or of the soul, and he shall not make the wicked, nor the ignorant, nor any, except the brethren alone, or other ingenious, upright, and learned men, partakers of esoterics. I am conscious to myself that this silence and prudent reservedness of mind will not be agreeable to all persons. However, the Pantheists shall not be more open till they are at full liberty to think as they please and speak as they think. 6. Perhaps one more curious than considerate should ask whether in effect such a society exists, whether the form we exhibited is there recited, or rather, as some have projected for models, the best of kings and the best regulated commonwealths, so to the image of the most agreeable and learned society all these things have been framed concerning the Pantheists. Perhaps, good sir. And what then, prithee, if the thing is so? Figure to yourself that they are not true, notwithstanding you must acknowledge them to be probable. They are all consistent with themselves, as in the most undoubted matters. Or, if you are willing to have a mixture of truth and falsehood, you may judge that those who read this Socratic assembly shall reap no less advantage from it than from the chorus of Horace, as it commands virtue and forbids vice. Bridles wild rage, loves rigid honesty, and strict observance of impartial laws, sobriety, security, and peace, and begs the gods to turn blind Fortune's wheel, to raise the wretched and pull down the proud. Lord Roscommon. If a person in poetry or painting should frame to himself a mistress adorned with all possible beauties and graces, though in reality he is not in the possession of such a one, yet he will not be thought to be devoid of love, or averse from beauty. But to clear up the matter in one word, there are undoubtedly in several places not a few Pantheists who, according to the custom of others, have their private assemblies and societies, where they feast together, and what is the sweetest kind of sauce, where they philosophize over it. Whether or no that form or any part of it is always and everywhere recited among them, I leave undecided. For your part, reader, whoever you are, make use of it, and I heartily wish that it may tend to your advantage. End of section 9, and end of Pantheisticon by John Toland.